Hello friends, this is the second part of Language of Paradox by Client Brooks. So we have already read that Brooks supports the use of paradox in literary writings to convey the meanings that can be drawn by the comparisons which are present there in paradoxes. He says in the writing of poems, paradox is used as a method by which unlikely comparisons can be drawn and meaning can be extracted from poems, both straightforward and enigmatic. Now, Brooks points here to explain his point. He gives example from two poets, that is William Wordsworth and John Donne, and yes, William Shakespeare also. So, Brooks points out to William Wordsworth's poem, "It is a beauteous evening, calm and free." He begins by outlining the initial and surface conflict, which is that the speaker is filled with worship while his female companion does not seem to be. The paradox discovered by the poem's end is that the girl is more full of worship than the speaker, precisely because she is always consumed with sympathy for nature and not, as it is the speaker, in tune with nature while immersed in it. So the paradox lies is here that the female companion is not religious at all, but the male companion is truly religious and he wants his companion to be religious as well. But her love for nature, sympathy for nature, makes her more religious than the speaker itself. So in his reading of Wordsworth's poem, here it's a beauteous evening, calm and free, and his next poem, of which Brooks talks about, is poem composed upon Westminster Bridge. Brooks contends that the poem offers paradox not in its details but in the situation which the speaker creates. Here the paradox lies in the situation. So, though London is a man made marvel and in many respects in opposition to the nature, the speaker does not view London as a mechanical and artificial landscape but as a landscape comprised entirely of nature. Since London was created by man and man is a part of nature, London is thus too a part of nature. So, uh, the paradox here is that nature and uh, which has not actually created London, which is a man-made country, should be a mechanical and artificial world which has artificial landscapes, but a landscape which landscape is always comprised of nature only. So London was created by man and man is a part of nature, so London is also a part of nature. So it is this reason that gives the speaker the opportunity to remark upon the beauty of London as he would a natural phenomenon, and Brooks points out can call the house sleeping rather than dead because they too are vivified with the natural spark of life granted to them by the men that build them. The city now doth like a garment wear the beauty of the morning. The city, which is a man made city, and it wears the morning like a garment. Silent, bare, ships, towers, domes, theatres, and temples lie upon unto the fields and to the sky, all bright and glittering in the smokeless air. So the morning air, which is smokeless, and later it becomes full of so much polluted air, but in the morning it shows the beautiful images of ships, towers, domes, theaters, and temples, which are all man made, but the sky is not made by man. It is bright, glittering in the smokeless air. The smoke is created by man, but the sky is not, and it carries the beauty. Now, when he moves towards the end of the essay, he ends it with a reading of John Donne's poem, The Canonization. It's a very famous poem. We have read it many times in our graduation also and PG also. So, the canonization, which uses a paradox as its underlying metaphor, using a charged religious term to describe the speaker's physical love as saintly, Donne effectively argues that in rejecting the material world and withdrawing to a world of each other, the two lovers are appropriate candidates for canonizations. Canonization is a religious process. So, these two lovers who are eligible candidates for canonization, they are actually canonized, they are actually purified because the love into their heart that has rejected the material world for each other, and they want to live with each other, with the soul of each other, and that is the condition of canonization. So this seems to parody both love and religion, and which actually is a theme of Donne's most poems, the parody of love and religion, but in fact it combines them. In fact, it combines both love and religion. That love is religion and religion is where love is. Uh, but in fact, it combines them, pairing unlikely circumstances and demonstrating their resulting complex meaning. The result, which is complex, is demonstrated here. Brooks points also to secondary paradoxes in the poem, that is, the simultaneous duality and singleness of love, and the double and contradictory meanings of die in metaphysical poetry, used here both as both a sexual union and literal death. Okay, so the critic Brooks, Client Brooks, he points out also to a secondary paradox in the poem, that is simultaneous duality and singleness of love, and the double and contradictory meaning of die in metaphysical poetry. So, can be used as sexual union and literal death. So, the quotation from Canonization, where Donne says, "The phoenix riddle hath more wit by us, we two being one are it. So to one neutral thing both sexes fit, we die and rise the same, and prove mysterious by this love." So phoenix riddle, phoenix which dies into the fire and leaves its wing beside. So it is for the two lovers that to one neutral thing both sexes fit. We die and rise the same, and prove mysterious by this love. So, Brooks contends that these several meanings are impossible to convey at the right depth in emotion in any language but that of paradox. Only paradox can convey it in depth. Now he gives another example. Similar paradox is used in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet when Juliet says, "For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm is holy palmer's kiss. Good pilgrim, you do wrong your hand too much, which mannerly devotion shows in this. For saints have hands that pilgrims' hands do touch, and palm to palm his holy palmer's kiss." Because you have touched the pilgrims, one who has touched the pilgrim, the devotees, they kiss their palms so that they can have the feeling of touching that holy shrine or the uh, holy temple. So this is a kind of devotion which the lovers have into themselves, that they touch each other's hand, they kiss each other's palm, and they have reached the divinity of love. They do not need to go to any temple, they have already reached the divine point. Brooks' contemporaries in the sciences were now. We are moving towards the conclusion, where we can say that Brooks' contemporaries in the sciences were in the 14s and 50s reorganizing university science curricula into codified disciplines. The study of English, however, remained less defined, and it became a goal of the new critical movement to justify literature in an age of science by separating the work from its author and reader, and by examining it as a self-sufficient artifact. In Brooks' use of the paradox as a tool for analysis, however, he develops a logical case as a literary technique with strong emotional effect. His reading of the canonization in the language of paradox, where paradox becomes central to expressing complicated ideas of sacred and secular love, provides an example of this development. Now, what is the irony here? The irony here is, although paradox and irony as new critical tools for reading poetry are often conflated. They are independent poetical devices. Irony for Brooks is the obvious wrapping of a statement by the context, whereas paradox is later glossed as a special kind of qualification which involves the resolution of opposites. Irony functions as a presence in the text, the overriding context of surrounding words that make up the poem. Only sentences such as 2 plus 2 are free from irony. Most other statements are prey to their immediate context and are altered by it, take their effect from it. Irony is the key to validating the poem because a test of any statement grows from the context. Validating a statement demands examining the statement in the context of the poem and determining whether it is appropriate to that context. However, paradox is essentially to the structure and being of the poem. In the language of paradox, the well wrought on, Brooks shows that paradox was essential to poetic meaning, that paradox was almost identical to poetry. According to fellow new critic Leroy Searle, Brooks' use of paradox emphasized the indeterminate lines between form and content. The form of the poem uniquely embodies its meaning, and the language of the poem effects the reconciliation of opposites or contraries. While irony functions within the poem, paradox often refers to the meaning and structure of the poem and is thus inclusive of irony. So, this existence of opposites or contraries and the reconciliation thereof is poetry and the meaning of the poem. So, what Brooks says is the concluding part of this lecture is man's experience is indeed a seamless garment, no part of which can be separated from the rest. Again, with a paradox. Thank you. Thank you very much.